Reddit Martian back with another tip-top video for you. r/AskReddit. Serious, what is the most shocking thing someone confessed while on their deathbed? My mum was from China, though we are now happily residing in an European country. We went back to China for my grandmother's last few weeks as she was dying from terminal cancer. On my grandma's last days, she requested that mum stay with her alone. And it was only then she revealed that my mum wasn't her biological kid. My grandma confessed that she has bought my mum from a child trafficking ring, which was common in China, because she had tried for many years and still couldn't get pregnant. My mother cried a lot, not only for the unimaginable pain that her biological parents likely went through in losing a baby, but also for the fact that my grandparents have went beyond to treat my mum as their little princess. They literally did treat my mum as their own. They were never abusive and only gave her the very best in life. They even willingly sent my mum to the US for university education, even though they aren't rich by any means. My dad was adopted from a woman who went to my grandparents' church and got pregnant out of wedlock. My grandpa confessed on his deathbed that he had actually had an affair with that woman and he was my dad's real father, which was why he suggested adopting him in the first place. My mom told me about the death of her father, my grandfather, and his last words to her. She said he was on his deathbed and it was obvious he was nearing the end. He motioned her over to tell her something. She went over, leaned in close, expecting some declaration of his love for her or some deeply insightful. He said the good family silverware is hidden in the ventilation system about 15 feet out from the furnace. She looked at him like he was crazy. He said, "What? We travel a lot and that's where I hid it. That shirt's expensive." He died the next morning. My grandfather was in the hospital in a pretty nasty state. He barely could speak, but he made it clear to us he had something to say. He had my mother get him a piece of paper and a pen, thinking he has some important words to leave us with in case he doesn't have the chance later. My mom does just that. There's silence in the room as he scribbles something onto the paper, with my mother and her two siblings waiting in anticipation. My grandfather finishes, and with a big smile turns the paper for us to see. "I've got a girlfriend," it read, as he pointed to Anna, a neighbor and friend of his. The goofball ended up pulling through and living several more years. I have a good and a bad story for this thread. I'll start with the good. It's not exactly on the deathbed, but as close as she was able to at the time. My aunt had cancer. She knew she was going to die and she knew it would probably be in less than a week. She couldn't eat and drinking was hard. She wanted to be sedated heavily, kept asleep permanently, essentially, for the last few days, because this whole dying thing sucks and I've had more than enough. So fair enough. A doctor is called up. A plan is made and carried out. The last thing my aunt said before going under for the rest of her life was, "I see the stars. They're sweet and run carefree. Gather them up." And that's when she went under. She died 3 days later. Nobody knows what she meant, but somehow, those last words fit her. So my uncle, her husband, got them tattooed on his chest, over his heart. The bad. My other uncle had been in a car accident. It was bad. In the ambulance on the way to the hospital, he said, "Tell my wife that Wendy is my daughter and I love her." Name changed for privacy. He died a few minutes later because of internal bleeding. Wendy was the neighbor's then 5-year-old child. That caused a huge shitstorm, I can tell you. My mother died when I was 11 of stage 4 cancer, while she was on hospice at home. My grandmother, on my dad's side, was standing by the bed. She woke up, heavily medicated, pointed and said, "What are you doing here? I never liked you." Not especially shocking but hilarious. It sounds heartless, but my grandmother gave my mom hell when she was alive. My other grandmother, mom's mom, tried to hold in laughter as she told her she taught her better than that. My grandpa told my dad he loved him for the first time when he was dying from cancer. Grandpa was a drunk all throughout my dad's childhood and had a strained relationship with the family, so this was pretty surprising to hear from him. Me and all of my cousins were gathered around my grandfather's hospice bed as he laid dying. Each and every one of my cousins, there's a lot of us, gave him a kiss and tried to talk to him, said they loved him, etc. But he wouldn't respond to any of them, just stared. Until I came up. I sat on the edge of his bed, holding his hand. Everyone was watching us. He looked at me and said, "I don't like Mexican food," and that was it. This was surprising to me but more sad than anything. I was always close to my granny, but I never had the heart to tell her I'm gay, as I had only heard her say negative things before about homosexuality. I didn't want to upset her and cause family problems. Towards the end she had suffered strokes and was unable to talk. My mother and uncle were in the hospital with her while she was dying. During this time my uncle confessed to my mother that granny had always known I am gay and that she didn't care and love me. I regret not having the balls to tell her before she died. Geraldine Kelly, who confessed to having murdered her husband and stuffed his body in a freezer for 13 years. To hear children as she lay dying of cancer. My uncle's last words were to my aunt. He said, "Don't let the ducking mortician take my gold teeth." My grandmother was super religious my whole life, always going to church and doing right by her community. In her last hours she said she really did not believe in God and wish she had not wasted all that time in her life doing what she thought others wanted her to do. It was pretty crazy for her husband, my dad and aunt to hear her say that. I had a hospice patient who asked everybody, "Is it the 13th of December?" Since mid-November she had been asking this. We'd hear this question multiple times every day and just assumed it was a family member's birthday or something. The 13th of December finally rolls around, and that's the day she dies. My husband's aunt, Mexican family, confessed to him on her deathbed that she spiced her tacos with Kroger brand taco seasoning. He's still a little shocked about it sometimes. This made me laugh. I can picture my granny doing something like this. I met a lady on a train to Edinburgh who was really nervous because she was on the way to meet her brother for the first time in 70 years. Her parents had told her that he died when he was 1, but they'd given him away because they couldn't afford so many kids. She didn't find out he was still alive until her mother confessed it on her deathbed. I have a great aunt that passed away when I was 17. Just before she did, my older brother confessed to her that I was gay. She called me in and explained how our family has been through so much and that she was willing to totally accept me for who I am. I think that is great of her to be that open-minded. Only one problem: I'm not gay. She never believed me because my brother had confessed it. The man who took the infamous picture of Loch Ness told his friend it was a fake on his deathbed. My mother worked as a nurse in the biggest hospital in Copenhagen. A dude is terminally ill with cancer, has his wife, children and entire family next to him. He decides before he dies that he was gonna phone the girl he was cheating with on his wife to meet up at the hospital when the entire family was there. My mother had to move the entire family into another room when she showed up because of massive shouting and hysteria. What a selfish prick he was. My grandpa's brother died of Parkinson's a couple of years ago. He was on hospice and all his loved ones were there to comfort him before he passed. He was incoherent his last couple of days, but just before he died, he sat up, looked at an empty corner and said, "Mom, you came for me," laid back down and died with a smile on his face. My great grandma was definitely someone who would come help her child transition to the next world, if there is one. She was a great lady. As my mother lay in her hospice bed dying of cancer, she beckoned me closer to her and said, "I've hidden the money. I've hidden the money in the..." She was having trouble speaking and getting breath and her voice was cracking. She tried one last time. "The money's in the..." She closed her eyes. Her breath stopped and her head slumped to one side. A few seconds later she burst out laughing. She was pranking me. She died 3 days later. Do you know what you are? That's right, you're a champ. Thanks for watching. Like and share if you enjoyed. Don't forget the bell Subscribe for more videos. See you soon, Martians.